This boy is a master doll maker with the extraordinary ability to breathe life into his creations. With these dolls by his side, he can face formidable monsters without breaking a sweat. Their utility extends far beyond the battlefield. With their tireless help, he can cultivate vast fields of crops, construct sturdy houses, and establish entire villages and ports in record time. These dolls are the ultimate companions, proving indispensable in every facet of life. Before too much of the mystery is revealed, it is time for the story to begin. Within the grand household of Count Diste, a maid named Benvenuto delivered a meal to Leopold, the family's third son. She inquired after his well-being, to which Leo remarked that he felt reasonably well. Though born into a noble lineage, Leo entered the world with a frail constitution that rarely permitted him to venture outdoors. During his early childhood, his mother had introduced him to the craft of doll making, a pursuit he could manage despite his weakness, and he had since mastered the art. In a family that prioritized martial prowess and physical strength, a person of his disposition found no true place. Born to a different mother than his siblings, Leo saw his treatment within the estate grow increasingly harsh following his mother's untimely passing. He reminded himself to remain patient, drawing secret strength from a hidden power he possessed. The quiet of his room was interrupted by the arrival of his elder brothers, Illuminato and Fiorenzo. They came to summon him to their father's presence, though they did not mask their disdain, openly questioning why the household continued to harbor a useless individual who spent his days crafting dolls. Ben voiced her concern for Leo upon witnessing the brothers' cruelty, but Leo grimly noted that their assessment of his standing was the objective truth. Upon entering his father's study, Caligula Diste reprimanded Leo for his tardiness and reminded him that his 15th birthday was only 1 week away. Caligula Diste explained that while a third son might typically expect to be married into another house, enlisted in the military, or sent off as an adventurer, simply casting Leo out would invite scrutiny from other noble families. Consequently, Caligula announced he was granting Leo a small territory of his own, Ventier Island. Leo was visibly shaken, pointing out that the location was a deserted island. When Caligula questioned if he was dissatisfied, Illuminato whispered to Fiorenzo that their father possessed a truly cruel streak. He remarked that Ventier Island was a worthless territory, a monster-infested wilderness that served as a death sentence rather than a gift. Boasting of his own status window and superior swordsmanship, Illuminato emphasized that such skills were how one truly contributed to the family. He mocked Leo for lacking even a garbage-tier skill as he reached the age of majority and warned him not to become food for the monsters. Leo silently departed the room and began packing his belongings. He had long anticipated a life as an adventurer and had been preparing for this eventual departure. While receiving a territory was normally considered a high honor, he understood that being sent to an undeveloped land like Ventier was a thinly veiled exile. Ben intercepted him, calling his name in distress after hearing the news. Leo reassured her, asserting that he would find a way to survive. As he shouldered his pack, he shared a secret he had guarded from the family. His health had improved significantly. He urged Ben to keep this revelation quiet and hinted that he did possess a skill, one perfectly suited to his nature, that would prove invaluable on the island. He requested that she see him off with a smile rather than tears. As the carriage pulled away, Ben could only whisper his name, praying for his safety. During the journey, Leo discovered that Ben had thoughtfully packed a lunch for him. He reflected on the fact that she was the only person who had come to bid him farewell, deciding that her kindness alone was sufficient. His travels took him through various villages by foot and cart, until 1 week later, he arrived at the coast. There, a skipper named Alvaro agreed to take him to Ventier Island via a small boat. As the island came into view, Alvaro questioned if Leo truly intended to stay. Leo confirmed his resolve, explaining he had been appointed as the island's lord. Alvaro remarked that while the land was undeveloped and clearly held a complicated history, he admired Leo's adventurous spirit. Upon reaching the shore, Alvaro promised to check on him once a week. After the skipper departed with a final wave, Leo began his exploration. He prioritized finding a secure location and eventually discovered a flat clearing near a cave. He reflected on the nature of skills, innate abilities that manifested by age 15 and were distinct from standard magic. While the world valued skills that could repel bandits or monsters, Leo's talent was not one of combat. He had practiced in secret for a year, hoping to secure his independence. Withdrawing a doll from his bag, he expressed his hope that it would be his strength. He placed his palm over the object and activated his skill, Marionette. To his amazement, the doll transitioned into a state of life. Leo recalled how he had spent his bedridden years crafting these figures, only to discover at age 14 that he could make them move. The animated doll bowed and introduced himself as Roy. Leo was stunned that the doll could speak, noting that his skill had never produced such a human-like result before. Roy explained that he had been by Leo's side since childhood and had long awaited the day they could converse. Recognizing that Roy's form was the very doll he had created with his mother, Leo welcomed him warmly. They set to work immediately to secure a shelter before nightfall. Leo planned to gather wood and cautioned Roy about the monsters rumored to inhabit the area. To Leo's surprise, Roy displayed incredible strength, easily hoisting heavy logs. Leo recalled casting physical enhancement spells on the doll in the past, but was still taken aback by the results. While Roy handled the heavy lifting, Leo contributed by chopping wood with a knife. Together they successfully constructed a modest wooden house. As Leo moved toward a pile of logs, expressing his gratitude to Roy for doing the bulk of the labor, he failed to notice a log shifting above him. Roy shouted a warning as the the timber fell. Leo tumbled to the ground, uninjured, but realized Roy had shielded him, resulting in the doll's arm being shattered. When Leo frantically asked if he was alright, Roy dismissed the injury, stating that as a doll, it did not matter. Leo firmly disagreed, insisting that Roy's well-being was important. He utilized healing magic to repair the arm, and pleaded with Roy not to dismiss his own safety, confessing that he needed to become more dependable himself. Roy thanked him, noting that having Leo there was a salvation for him as well. Leo felt a surge of emotion. For the first time in his life, someone was relying on him, rather than looking down on him. As evening fell, they sat by a fire. Roy marveled at Leo's ability to conjure flames with magic, though Leo brushed it off as a basic necessity. They prepared food on sticks, and Leo felt as though he had gained a younger brother. However, his focus wavered, and he burned his tongue on the hot food, prompting a gentle warning from Roy. Leo acknowledged the uncertainty of their future on the island, but remained optimistic about their partnership. This moment of peace was brief, as Leo burned his tongue a second time. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the forest, a small bloodied cat faced a formidable multi-tailed creature. Sensing the shift in the environment, Roy alerted Leo to a malevolent presence lurking nearby. The massive beast hoisted a heavy paw, poised to deliver a lethal blow to the cornered cat, but Roy intervened with blinding speed. Leaping forward, he swung his blade and struck the creature down in a single decisive stroke. Leo breathed a sigh of relief that they had arrived in time. But his relief was soon replaced by astonishment, as he watched the numbers on his own skill card climb. He recalled from his secret practice sessions back at the manor that when his dolls defeated a monster, his own level would increase as their master. The sheer volume of experience he was currently receiving suggested this particular foe was exceptionally formidable. Roy approached Leo holding several glowing magic stones and asked if he should collect them. Leo examined the stones, noting that they manifest upon a monster's defeat and can be used to power magic tools or serve as a valuable currency in trade. Though they were considered worthless by the Diste household, Leo realized they would be essential for their survival on the island. Turning his attention to the injured feline, Leo noted with concern that its condition was dire and required immediate treatment. Inside their newly built home, the cat growled instinctively as Leo approached. He spoke softly to reassure the creature, promising to help as he channeled a healing spell. As the magic took effect and the wounds closed, the animal finally grew calm. Leo identified the creature as a Bio Gato, a shadow cat. Though they were known to be ferocious monsters, this one appeared remarkably friendly. Roy remarked on its docile nature, which Leo attributed to its youth, though he privately worried that a protective parent might eventually come searching for it. Roy inquired about their next move, and Leo decided they would release the cat back into the forest the following morning, once it had fully recovered, reasoning that it was still a monster regardless of its current size. The next morning, Leo was roused by the sensation of a small paw batting at his face. Roy entered the room shortly after to deliver breakfast, greeting Leo as he noted how lively their guest had become. Leo returned the greeting but reminded himself not to grow too attached. Roy pointed out that the small creature had remained curled up by Leo's side throughout the entire night. As Leo patted the cat's head, he began to doubt whether such a small creature could truly survive the trek back to its parent alone. When the time came to let the cat go, the task proved more difficult than anticipated. The feline refused to leave, moving closer to Leo and nuzzling his feet. Leo lifted the creature and asked if it truly wished to stay rather than return to its mother. The cat offered no response to the mention of its mother, but donned a clear smile when asked if it wanted to remain with them. Leo relented, deciding they would stay together for the time being. Leo soon set to work tilling the soil with a hoe, the cat watching his every move with curiosity. He showed the creature a collection of vegetable seeds he had purchased during his journey, explaining his intent to establish a farm on the island. He demonstrated how to poke holes in the earth and plant the seeds, wondering if the cat was attempting to assist him as it paced through the freshly turned dirt. However, his focus shifted when he spotted a set of large, unfamiliar footprints. He summoned Roy, who confirmed the tracks were relatively fresh and likely belonged to a monster. Leo asserted that they should investigate immediately to neutralize any threats to their safety. When the cat raised a paw to join them, Leo nodded and allowed it to follow. The investigation led them to a creature identical to the one Roy had slain previously, though this specimen was significantly larger and visibly enraged by the loss of its companion. As the monster swung a powerful paw, Roy deflected the strike, but Leo noticed that the impact nearly halted Roy's blade. Recognizing the beast's incredible strength and speed, Leo felt a desperate urge to contribute. An idea took hold. He reached into his bag and hurled two of his spare dolls toward the beast. Using his marionette skill, he directed the dolls to create a distraction, successfully drawing the monster's attention away from Roy. Seeing a momentary opening, Leo alerted his companion. Roy rushed forward and leaped, aiming for the beast's head. His blade bit deep into the creature's neck, but the monster managed a retaliatory strike, launching its paw directly at Leo. Roy cried out in alarm, but before the blow could land, the cat pounced, sinking its teeth into the monster's arm. This interference gave Roy the window he needed to unleash a flurry of precise cuts, finally defeating the behemoth. The cat leaped back into Leo's arms as he marveled at their victory, praising both of his companions for their incredible performance. Roy countered that Leo's tactical support had been vital. Feeling a deep surge of gratitude, Leo decided the cat deserved a proper name. He lifted the creature and dubbed it Kore. The moment the name was uttered, a glowing magic circle materialized beneath beneath them. Leo realized with a start that he had inadvertently triggered a familiar contract, a bond that only forms when a profound connection is established between a human and a monster. He found it ironic that his exile to a deserted island had led to such a rare occurrence. He hugged Kore tightly, officially welcoming the cat into his life. Meanwhile, amidst turbulent waves in the surrounding sea, a ship cut through the water. The captain spotted the silhouette of the island and inquired if the young woman on board wished to make landfall. Staring toward the horizon, she murmured that he might be there, and commanded the crew to take them ashore. 2 weeks had elapsed since Leo first arrived on the island. In that time, his circle of companions had grown, and the environment surrounding his modest home had undergone steady improvements. Between cultivating crops and exterminating local monsters, his days were filled with labor. Today marked the second visit from Alvaro, the traveling merchant. During his stop the previous week, Leo had offered magic stones as payment for supplies, but the merchant had lacked sufficient change, promising to settle the balance today. Leo found himself wondering just how much that remaining amount would entail. As Alvaro's boat neared the shore, the merchant waved energetically before disembarking. He inquired if anything significant had changed on the island, to which Leo simply replied in the negative. Alvaro then presented Leo with a ring to settle the previous transaction. Leo was visibly startled, recognizing the artifact as a storage ring, an item so rare and valuable that adventurers would famously give their right arm to possess one. He questioned if this was truly the legendary tool capable of storing equipment within a pocket of space-time magic. Alvaro confirmed this and encouraged Leo to test its capabilities. Slipping the ring onto his finger, Leo pointed it toward a collection of items on the ground. He was amazed when the objects vanished into the ring instantly. Despite his excitement, Leo hesitated, asking if Alvaro was certain about parting with such an expensive treasure. Alvaro bowed his head apologetically and clarified the situation. He explained that when he had presented Leo's magic stones to the guild, the receptionist had been stunned by their extraordinary quality. The guild master had eventually intervened, sensing that Alvaro was withholding the source of the stones. Rather than seizing the stones by force, the guild master had instructed Alvaro to sell the storage ring to Leo, viewing it as an investment to ensure the collection of even more high-quality stones in the future. In essence, by accepting the ring now, Leo would be expected to compensate for the vast difference in its value through future trade. Leo expressed his gratitude for the assistance and agreed to the terms. A beaming Alvaro grasped Leo's hand, declaring that he was now in Leo's debt. After the merchant departed, Leo examined the ring with a mix of resolve and apprehension. While he had intended to deliver large quantities of stones regardless, the arrangement felt like a weight of expectation. Nevertheless, he acknowledged that the ring would make the island's development far more efficient. The primary obstacle remained a lack of manpower. He realized he could not yet fully utilize the ring's potential with only Roy and his 2 other dolls to assist him. Standing in the field with his palm resting on his jaw, Leo determined that he must craft more dolls to cultivate the land and grow commercial crops. His plan expanded. They would not only farm, but also hunt monsters more aggressively to gather stones. He clenched his fist, vowing to do his best. With Roy's assistance, Leo began the arduous process of crafting new dolls, though their progress was frequently interrupted by Kore, who playfully bit at the wooden figures. Exhaustion eventually claimed Leo, and he fell asleep late at night while still carving a new wooden form. The following morning, Roy entered the room with urgent news. Someone had collapsed on the beach. Upon reaching the shore, they discovered a man with a sword strapped to his back lying unconscious near the water. As the stranger regained consciousness, Leo inquired after his health. The man bolted upright, his immediate concern focused on his missing companions. He explained that a massive wave had swept them from their vessel, and he struggled to stand, insisting he needed to begin a search. Leo cautioned him to remain still, noting his injuries, but the man countered that his own safety was irrelevant given the circumstances. Their exchange was interrupted by the arrival of a young woman who addressed the man as Gaio. Relieved to see her, Gaio identified her as Lady Elena. Elena rushed to his side, expressing her immense gratitude that he had survived. She apologized for the ordeal, but Gaio insisted he had acted of his own volition. With tears in her eyes, Elena observed the injuries to his legs, her relief palpable. She then informed Gaio that it was Leo and Roy who had rescued them from their peril. Inside a nearby tent, one of Leo's dolls served water to the recovering Gaio. Elena offered Leo a sincere expression of thanks and introduced herself. Leo introduced himself in return, identifying himself as the Lord of the Island. Upon hearing his title, Elena moved to offer a formal apology for any perceived disrespect, but Leo waved it off, urging her not to be so rigid. He admitted that while he held the title of Lord, his only subjects were his dolls and the offspring of monsters. Elena was shocked by this revelation, asking for confirmation that no other humans resided there. Leo reaffirmed that he was the sole human inhabitant before introducing Kuore to her. Roy soon entered carrying a tray of tea, inviting Elena to refresh herself. Leo pivoted the conversation back to their arrival, asking for details about the huge wave Gaio had mentioned. Elena explained that they had been traveling to a specific destination when a violent storm overtook their ship. They owed their lives entirely to Gaio's protection. When Leo pressed for information regarding their destination, he noticed her hesitation. He privately surmised that they likely had a sensitive reason for their secrecy, noting that their fine attire suggested they were no mere commoners. Gathering Kura into his arms, Leo apologized for prying while they were still exhausted and encouraged them to rest while he attended to to his chores. As Leo walked alongside Roy and Kuwere, Roy inquired about the specific tasks Leo had previously mentioned. In response, Leo entered the kitchen to begin cooking. Once the preparations were complete, they began arranging an impressive variety of dishes across the table. Elena and the other survivors stood in awe, visibly amazed at the sight of the abundant spread. Elena questioned what had prompted such a feast, and Leo clarified that he surmised they must be famished after their ordeal, explaining that he and his dolls had collaborated to prepare a nourishing meal for everyone. As Elena thanked him, Roy whispered a concern to Leo, questioning if they should be so generous with their resources, especially given the debt incurred by the storage ring. Leo acknowledged the logic but insisted that his priority was helping those in need. Elena overheard the sentiment, asked why he treated them with such profound kindness. Leo reflected on his own past, explaining that when he was in his own moment of desperation, someone had reached out a hand to help him. He felt a duty to pass that kindness on to others in distress. Corey approached Elena, rubbing its head against her in a show of affection. Softening, Elena picked up the cat and asked Leo if he would be willing to listen to the full truth of their story. Elena began her account by introducing herself formally as Elena Luzin, the daughter of the former head of House Luzin. Leo recognized the name immediately, recalling that the family governed the southernmost territory of the Kingdom of Vatik. He remembered the Luzin domain as a prominent peninsula, whose economy flourished primarily through its fishing industry and seafood trade. Elena confirmed his memory but added somberly that her father, who was both a devoted lord and the head of their household, had passed away suddenly only a few months prior. She shared a memory of a rainy day shortly before his death. She had asked her father if he intended to inspect the regions damaged by a recent storm the following morning. He had affirmed his plans, and then noted with pride that she was still studying late into the night. He remarked that her dedication was admirable but cautioned her not to push herself beyond her limits. Her father had always cared deeply for his people, and Elena had aspired to become a leader just like him. Having lost her mother to illness when she was very young, Elena had been raised by her father with a blend of strictness and profound kindness. He had once gifted her a hair ribbon, explaining it was an ornament her mother used to wear, and urged her to treasure it always. Even during her father's frequent absences, Elena had remained dedicated to her studies. Life at the manor was busy but happy, and the staff were exceptionally kind. Her peace was shattered during one of her father's inspection tours, when a staff member arrived with a devastating report. Her father was dead. He had supposedly perished in an accident while surveying a disaster area. As she wept, confessing to Leo how much she had loved him, Gaio moved closer and gently called her name to offer comfort. As Leo served tea, he reflected on the immense pain of losing someone so vital. He eventually voiced the logical question: if she was the heir, she should have naturally become the next head of the house. So he wondered how she had ended up fleeing on a ship. At that moment, another survivor entered the conversation, explaining that the situation was far more complicated. He introduced himself as Sebastiano, Elena's butler. He clarified that while Elena was intended to lead once she came of age, her uncle Muzio had insisted on becoming her guardian to help manage the estate's affairs. Leo questioned the necessity of a guardian so close to her coming of age. Sebastiano explained that under normal circumstances it would have been unnecessary. However, the territory had been ravaged by consecutive disasters, and the populace was gripped by anxiety. Muzio was appointed as a guardian under the guise of stabilizing the region, but he revealed his true nature almost immediately. Elena recalled a day she had been looking at a family portrait, promising her late father she would do her best, when a commotion erupted outside the manor. Using disaster reconstruction as a pretext, Muzio had levied massive tax increases on the people. He then brazenly announced that Elena would be engaged to his own son, who would then be positioned to become the next head of House Louisin. Elena and her loyalists opposed the scheme, leading to months of internal conflict. The situation reached a breaking point when Gaio warned them that Muzio was planning an assassination. A loud explosion soon echoed through the manor. Gaio, assisting Elena, urged Sebastiano to hurry through a hidden passage while his own men stayed behind to stall the attackers. As they moved through the secret tunnels, Sebastiano suggested they flee by sea. When they emerged from the passage, Elena watched with teary eyes as her family home burned in the distance. Thanks to Gaio's connections and Sebastiano's quick thinking, they managed to escape to the sea and begin their journey as fugitives. However, a violent storm eventually struck their vessel, separating them from Gaio and causing them to drift to the island. Elena lamented that they had lost their land, their family, and their home. She expressed deep gratitude to Leo, addressing him as Lord and thanking him for welcoming strangers and providing them with a meal. She credited him with saving her most important retainer and admitted that the past few months had been defined by agonizing anxiety. She confessed that finally speaking about her trauma helped ease the burden. Leo observed her silently, noting that she was roughly his own age, yet had endured such profound suffering while trying to remain cheerful for the sake of others. He called for everyone's attention and made an unexpected offer. He invited them to live permanently on the island. The group was stunned. Elena thanked him for his kindness, but explained that they had only shared their story to show their sincerity. She worried that if Muzio discovered their location, it would put Leo in grave danger, and they intended to leave soon to avoid causing trouble. Leo countered that since they had sailed directly into a storm, Muzio had likely lost their trail fail and might even presume them dead. Gaio conceded that the logic was sound, and that Elena might actually be safer remaining hidden on the island. Leo then spoke from the heart, noting that they shared a common bond. Elena had lost her father, the retainers had lost their lord, and all of them had been driven from their homeland. He acknowledged the loneliness and pain of their situation. He admitted the island was still undeveloped, but he declared his ambition to turn it into a place everyone could call home. As the lord of the island, he promised to protect them all, and added that having Elena and her companions help him would give him a great deal of confidence. Elena replied that if he was certain they could be of use, they would be honored to stay. Leo smiled and remarked that their first priority would be constructing proper housing. Sebastiano noted that building a house was no simple task, but Leo told him not to worry, hinting that he had a secret trick up his sleeve. A while later, Leo handed the ship's survivors a comprehensive set of construction tools, leading them to a specific site. He indicated that he wished for them to begin building their new homes. Elena was moved by his generosity, remarking that she was deeply touched. He would provide housing for the entire crew as well. Leo reassured her, noting that with so many additional hands, the pioneering efforts would progress much more rapidly. Elena agreed, expressing that it was a true pleasure to work alongside him. Leo then addressed his status, clarifying that although he was technically the lord of the island, he held no formal noble title. He insisted that she simply call him Leo. Elena smiled and suggested that he, in turn, address her only as Elena. After they exchanged a warm introduction, Leo unfurled a blueprint he had drafted, explaining the layout he envisioned for their future settlement. His own house would serve as the central manor, fronted by a town square, with all other residences arranged in a surrounding circle. He explained that this configuration would allow them to respond instantly should anything threaten Elena's safety. He planned for his own quarters and Gaio's group to be adjacent, while stationing the most combat-capable individuals closer to the coastline to intercept any approaching enemies. The entire perimeter would eventually be enclosed by a sturdy fence. Leo acknowledged that because the island was currently dominated by dense forest, their first priority was clearing the land. He divided the group into specialized teams, one for forest clearing and construction, which included a fully healed Gaio, and another for field expansion and food procurement. After some time had passed, Gaio observed that the work was going to take considerable effort, and noted a few growing concerns. Sebastiano added that monsters seemed to roam this island with far greater frequency than on the mainland, suggesting it would be perilous to leave any team without a capable fighter. Leo revealed he had a secret plan for their protection. He summoned his newest creations, and 3 figures emerged: Rag, Dona, and Ol. He introduced them as dolls, animated through his marionette skill, explaining that they were fully capable of combat, and that Roy had already proven the skill's effectiveness by slaying large monsters. Gaio and Sebastiano were struck with awe, finding the concept of dolls fighting with such proficiency incredible. Leo detailed how the skill functioned by channeling mana into handcrafted vessels, though he admitted that Roy remained an anomaly. Roy alone possessed the ability to speak, think, and act with complete autonomy, a mystery even to Leo. He assured them that with these assistants, their pace would increase significantly, and the safety of the survivors would be guaranteed. In the following weeks, the island hummed with activity, with the dolls assisting in construction, gathering resources, and repelling monsters under Roy's leadership. The daily burdens became light and communal. The group shared meals and found peace in their new routine. 14 days later, everyone stood back to admire the fruit of their labor. A village had risen exactly according to the blueprint. Guided by Sebastiano, Leo inspected the results. He was stunned by the craftsmanship, noting that the quality of the buildings and the furniture was exceptional. Sebastiano took visible pride in the work, admitting he had insisted on every aesthetic detail. When they visited the fields, they found them teeming with healthy crops. Leo marveled at the transformation of the land. Elena credited Ol, Rag, and Donna for their tireless help, while Gaio remained fascinated by the marionette skill. He asserted that with such power, Leo could realistically build an entire nation. When Leo tried to deflect the praise, insisting it was everyone else's hard work, Sebastiano interrupted. He emphasized that coordinating and commanding a group of this size was a remarkable feat of leadership, declaring that Leo was proving to be an excellent lord. Embarrassed, Leo scratched his head and thanked them. He noticed that the growth rate of the new crops was abnormally fast. Elena and Gaio concurred, with Gaio theorizing that the island might be magically unique. He pointed out that the rapid crop cycles and the unusual density of monsters for an isolated island suggested the land was a wellspring of magical energy. Leo realized this meant their yields and magic stone collection could support large-scale trade in the future. This realization was interrupted by the arrival of Alvaro. The merchant hailed Leo as young master, looking around in disbelief at the village that had appeared seemingly overnight. When Leo asked why he had arrived outside of his usual schedule, Alvaro began to explain, but was cut off as Ben suddenly appeared from behind him. She called out to Leo, who was shocked to find his former maid on the island. Ben rushed to hug him, relieved to find him safe. Leo demanded to know why she had come, and Ben reported that the Diste domain was in a state of chaos. Upon hearing the name Diste, Elena, Gaio, and Sebastiano exchanged startled glances. Elena realized that that the Diste domain was the very destination they had been sailing toward before the storm. Leo inquired as to what had transpired, and Ben revealed the grim truth. Since his departure, the Diste household had been pushed to the brink of total ruin. Leo was incredulous, questioning if she meant the entire Diste domain had collapsed in less than a single month. Ben confirmed his fears. She explained that almost immediately after Leo was exiled, a staggering number of monsters began a relentless assault on the territory. She recounted a day when a group of men arrived to report to the Count that the Adventurers Guild could no longer keep up with the onslaught. The damage was spreading across the land as monsters appeared in unprecedented numbers. The guild had filed numerous complaints, asserting that without direct support from the Lord, they were being bled dry both financially and physically. Calogero, however, had simply gritted his teeth in disgust, dismissing their pleas as nonsense. He had arrogantly questioned why he should be expected to help common peasants, ultimately ordering his subordinates to leave the people to their fate. Calogero had chosen to turn a blind eye, leaving the monster crisis entirely in the hands of the guild, without providing a single resource. As a result of this negligence, the guild officially withdrew from the Diste domain. They declared the burden too great to bear alone, and under the direct orders of Guildmaster Faust, the adventurers were transferred to guilds in neighboring territories. With their departure, the common people were left defenseless, and the casualties began to mount. Calogero had merely clicked his tongue in irritation at the news, ordering his soldiers to be deployed, and commanding the recruitment of new mercenaries. Alone in his study, he cursed the lowly commoners for the inconvenience. Previously, the guild had effectively served as the domain's primary defense force, at no cost to the Lord, as they were funded by the villagers' own requests. With the guild gone, the manor's soldiers were forced to take over the extermination duties, leading to a wave of severe injuries among the ranks. What followed was a sequence of events too painful to witness. Taxes were hiked to exorbitant levels to cover the massive expense of hiring outside mercenaries. These hired blades, lacking any loyalty to the land, began terrorizing the citizens, causing public order to deteriorate rapidly. The rot eventually reached the manor itself. Servants were drafted into manual labor or military service. Staff resigned one by one in protest, and the workload for those who remained became an unbearable burden. Leo was visibly shaken by the harrowing news. Ben continued her account, explaining that the dire situation had forced her to make a pivotal choice. She realized that if she were to continue wearing herself down at the manor, separated from Leo, she would rather abandon the estate entirely to follow him. As fortune would have it, she encountered Alvaro during her escape. At this point, Alvaro interjected, admitting he now fully understood the gravity of the situation. He confessed that while he had been cautious at first, having some inkling of Leo's circumstances, he became certain that bringing Ben along was the right decision. He remarked that the sheer joy she displayed whenever speaking of the young master was undeniable. Leo remained silent, his mind racing with a sobering realization. He wondered if the sudden surge of monsters in the Diste domain was a direct result of his absence, specifically because he was no longer there to thin their numbers during his secret marionette training sessions. However, he pushed the thought aside, noting that since he had been cast out by his father, there was nothing he could do for his former home now. Elena finally spoke, her voice heavy as she processed the state of the Diste domain. She revealed that her grandfather had been a close friend of the previous head of the Diste household, and she had originally intended to seek their sanctuary. Ben responded sadly, noting that while the previous head would have welcomed them with open arms, the current Lord Calogero would likely have offered no such kindness. Gaio sighed, remarking that in light of the domain's collapse, reaching Ventier Island was a stroke of incredible luck. Ben's expression turned solemn as she spoke of her family's deep debt to the Diste lineage, dating back to the time of Leo's grandfather. She confessed that running away felt like a betrayal of that kindness, and that she felt ashamed to even face Leo. However, she explained that not a single day had passed since his departure where she hadn't longed for the time they spent together. It was through that loneliness she realized her heart's true desire. The only person she truly wished to serve was Leo. She knelt before him, her voice trembling as she apologized for the cowardly weakness that had prevented her from following him the day he was exiled. Clasping his hand, she pleaded for the chance to serve him once more. Leo responded immediately, telling her, of course. He thanked her for braving such danger to find him and insisted they would start fresh together. Privately, he considered that Ben was likely not the only person fleeing the Diste domain. There were surely many others who had lost their homes and were drowning in uncertainty. He addressed the gathered group, acknowledging that while the island was still largely an undeveloped wilderness, they would not stop their pioneering efforts. He vowed to welcome anyone who sought refuge, transforming the island into a sanctuary where people could find true peace of mind. Raising his hand toward the sky, he cheerfully announced his dream to make the island a place where everyone could wish for happiness. Teary-eyed, Ben remarked on how admirable he had become. Elena chimed in, pledging their help to turn the island into a wonderful home. Alvaro moved closer, stating he would play his part as well by bringing someone next time who might be willing to help with their efforts. After Leo thanked him, Alvaro waved goodbye and departed in his small boat. Leo turned to Ben and offered to show her around the village. He led her through the expanding fields, fields and the houses they had constructed. Ben was amazed, stating that the level of development was incredible. Leo credited the hard work of everyone involved, but Ben insisted that he had already become a fine lord. Sebastiano noted that while the village was complete, they had yet to hear a formal inaugural speech from their leader. Gaio agreed, encouraging Leo to offer a few proper words to the people. Though embarrassed, Leo reluctantly agreed and suggested they gather everyone in the town square. At that moment, the peace was shattered as a pack of goblins materialized, crashing through the perimeter fence. Roy rushed forward instantly, telling the others to leave the threat to him. Gaio muttered that the frequency of these attacks had been increasing lately. Seeing Ben's terrified expression, Leo reassured her that with Roy and the other dolls guarding them, the village remained safe. Ben shook her head, revealing a troubling rumor she had heard. A massive monster den allegedly existed somewhere on the island. The group was stunned by the revelation. Leo immediately suggested that all combat-capable members prepare to mobilize and eliminate the den to ensure the village's long-term safety. Meanwhile, at the heart of the hidden lair, a swarm of monsters gathered, led by a creature of truly colossal proportions. The group set out to locate the den, and upon arriving, they observed the site from a distance, confirming that the reality matched the grim rumors. Ben muttered that the nest was far closer to the village than she had anticipated, to which Gaio replied that had they noticed any later, the village would surely have been invaded. Leo silently reflected that it was fortunate they had taken the initiative with a small elite group capable of moving immediately. He then formally ordered the combat team to prepare for the subjugation. Sebastiano agreed, noting that while they needed to prepare, it was imperative to strike before the goblins could launch a coordinated full-scale attack. Gaio added a warning, stating that goblins have been known to gather in groups of over 100. Leo designated Sebastiano to remain in the village as a guard, supported by a contingent of marionettes. Elena thanked him sincerely and urged him not to overexert himself. Suddenly, Ben spoke up, begging Leo to take her with them. She explained that she roughly knew the location of the nest and was capable of fighting. When Leo began to argue, Ben insisted that she wanted to be useful to both her master and the village. She revealed a secret from her past. She had previously served as a personal guard for Leo's mother. Surprised, Leo asked if this was true, and upon her firm confirmation, he agreed to let her join the front line. He decided the four of them would conduct the initial reconnaissance. Elena bid them farewell, praying that fortune would be with them in battle. As the four approached the den, Gaio noted that the enemy numbers far exceeded his expectations. Leo suggested they retreat momentarily to better prepare, but they quickly realized goblins had already moved into position behind them. Roy turned to Leo for instructions, and Leo, realizing they could not risk the monsters discovering the village's location, ordered an immediate preemptive strike. He commanded Gaio to take the lead, with Roy and Ben guarding the flanks while he took the rear. They charged into the fray. After cornering a segment of the goblin force, Leo was shocked by their sheer quantity and warned himself not to let his guard down. Upon entering the cave, they encountered a fork in the path. To determine their next move, Leo devised a plan. He ordered two of his dolls to set fires at both entrances of the fork. Ben immediately understood his intent to smoke the monsters out. Leo explained that if the goblins could not withstand the smoke, they would be forced into the open where they could be defeated more easily. Gaio praised the efficiency of the plan, suggesting they take turns keeping watch. Suddenly, Roy spotted goblins creeping up behind Gaio and rushed in to strike them down. Gaio was left speechless by the doll's speed, while Ben watched in amazement. Leo suggested they switch positions since Gaio had been at the front for so long. As they rotated, Gaio thought to himself that he hadn't realized Roy was capable of such fluid, high-level movement, wondering if it was the true power of Leo's special skill. Their progress was interrupted by a sudden heavy noise. Ben shouted a warning just as a massive goblin king came into view. The king lunged to grab Ben, but Leo acted instantly, throwing a doll to distract the creature. While the king was occupied striking the elusive marionettes, Leo ordered the team to fall back. The ceiling began to tremble and collapse under the king's frustrated strikes. Seeing an opportunity, Leo formulated a new strategy and relayed it to the group. Roy ran forward to keep the king's attention fixed on him. As the smaller goblins began to swarm, Ben and Gaio braced themselves. Ben swung her sword with precision, cutting down the smaller foes. Gaio, impressed by the high-level combat around him, remarked that he was witnessing a true showdown between Leo's closest aides and vowed to hold the line. He urged Leo to focus on the plan. With two dolls hovering behind him, Leo declared that they would begin the final phase. As the fight wore on, Roy expressed his amazement at Ben's combat prowess. Ben replied with a smirk that such skill was simply part of a maid's duty, as Master Leo's foremost aide, causing Roy to pout. As Gaio struggled to repel the king's massive blows, he called out to Leo, warning that they were reaching their limit. Leo replied that he only needed a moment more. When he was ready, he signaled Ben and Roy. As they pinned the king in place, the two dolls at the ceiling released a massive boulder they had been positioned to move. The rock plummeted, knocking the king down and dealing a decisive blow. Seeing their leader fall, the remaining small goblins fled in terror. Exhausted, Gaio heaved a heavy sigh of relief. Roy turned to Ben and admitted, somewhat reluctantly, that she truly had earned her place as Leo's longtime attendant. Ben chuckled and thanked him for the acknowledgement. Meanwhile, Gaio reflected silently on the encounter, thinking that Leo's instant tactical thinking and unique skill were truly incredible. He became certain that Leo was destined to become a great man. Leo announced that the goblin threat had finally been neutralized. Roy noted that it was fortunate they had cleared the large cave before the monsters could organize a mass raid. Gaio, observing the size of the cavern, speculated that a place this large might contain treasure. Instead, he discovered a subterranean lake. Upon tasting the water, he realized it was seawater. Ben asked if that meant it connected directly to the ocean. Leo pondered the discovery for a moment, recalling Alvaro's promise to bring a helpful contact to the island. A new vision took hold. He declared to the group that they would build a port right there inside the cave. This bold proclamation left everyone in the group completely stunned. After some time had passed, Guildmaster Faust rowed in a small boat with Alvaro acting as his skipper. Faust remarked sternly that Alvaro's tale had better be the truth, to which Alvaro insisted that he was not exaggerating. The young master had indeed constructed a port on the island. When they arrived, Faust stood in stunned silence at the sight of the structure. Upon entering the cavern, Leo greeted Alvaro and inquired about his companion. Faust introduced himself as the Guildmaster, though he found himself blushing when the beautiful Elena approached to welcome him as a guest to Ventier Island. Alvaro turned to Leo, breathless as he took in the scope of the facility. He noted that while he had heard rumors of a port, he never expected something this incredible. Faust, equally shocked, demanded to know how Leo had accomplished such a feat. Leo meticulously detailed the events from the beginning: the discovery of the goblin nest, the subjugation of the goblin king, the discovery of the subterranean lake, and the subsequent construction of the port through the combined efforts of his dolls and his companions. Faust turned to Alvaro in a daze, noting that Alvaro had only mentioned the port a week ago. He asked if Alvaro had been hiding this from him, but Alvaro clarified that 2 weeks ago, not a single trace of a port existed. Faust clutched his head as the reality set in. They had built an entire port in just 7 days. Later, inside the manor, Faust sat with a small towel pressed to his forehead to soothe his growing headache. When Leo asked if he was all right, Faust apologized for his unsightly display, explaining he was simply overwhelmed. He asked for clarification on their surroundings, and Leo informed him that they were inside the village's manor. Faust marveled at the fact, stating that Leo was truly an incredible lord. Leo shook his hand, officially introducing himself. Ben then approached, noting it had been a long time since they last met. Faust recognized her from the Diste's mansion, and offered an apology for the guild's past actions. He explained that after constant clashes with Lord Caligaro, the guild had been forced to withdraw, a move that resulted in the loss of many soldiers' lives. He lamented that it appeared as though they had abandoned the territory. Ben reassured him, stating that as a leader responsible for the lives of adventurers, he had made the correct decision. Faust grew quiet, touched by her words. Ben then told Leo that Faust was a wonderful man who carried the heavy burden of responsibility for many. Leo acknowledged this with understanding. Faust chuckled, admitting he was a bit embarrassed by the praise, and told Leo there was no need for such formality. He thanked Leo for their frequent transactions, but pressed to know the true reason behind the port. Leo explained his ambition to establish large-scale trade, hoping to attract more people and continue the island's rapid development. Outside, Gaio's voice echoed through the village, announcing that the festivities were starting. Leo and Faust joined him, and Gaio was surprised to see the famous guildmaster in person. After a warm welcome, Leo and Gaio led Faust through the cave entrance to the port. The interior was now illuminated by light posts, with a sturdy wooden path constructed above the water. Faust murmured in disbelief at how far the development had progressed. Leo insisted it was a collective effort. They arrived at a lively scene where many people had gathered under celebratory banners. Gaio announced that the star of the show had arrived, and Sebastiano waved Leo over to a table laden with food. Elena informed Leo that she and Ben had prepared the spread. Faust watched in awe as Alvaro, already munching on a stick of grilled fish, explained that it was the port's opening ceremony. Alvaro offered Faust a plate, which Faust initially refused until Leo insisted he should not hesitate. Upon taking a bite, Faust was forced to admit the food was delicious. Sebastiano then approached, reminding Leo that his inaugural speech had been delayed earlier, and that he must address the people properly now. As Roy and Leo prepared to cut the ribbon, Leo asked the crowd if they were enjoying themselves. He thanked everyone for their hard work in building the village and completing the port. He then introduced Guildmaster Faust, announcing that Faust would be helping to bring more people to their shores. The crowd erupted in cheers. Alvaro clapped Faust on the shoulder, remarking, "Well played," while Faust privately noted that while Leo seemed carefree, he was actually a very capable leader. Leo declared that the development of Ventier Island would continue, and together with Roy, he cut the ribbon to thunderous applause. Mugs were raised in a toast to their success. Afterward, Faust told Leo that since he had made such a public announcement, he had no choice but to follow through. Leo apologized for getting carried away, but Faust smiled, stating it was the first time he had been truly surprised in years. He offered his hand, officially pledging his help to the island's development. Faust then turned to the logistics of attracting people, asking if the island had a specialty product. Sebastiano worried that without a standout attraction, growth might be difficult. Faust disagreed, explaining that if they lacked a specialty, they would simply create one, whether through tourism, crafts, or cuisine. Elena noted that the ingredients on the island tasted superior to anything she had encountered elsewhere. Faust agreed, suggesting they focus on cuisine, banquets, and alcohol. He mentioned he knew someone who could assist and promised to bring them on his next visit. Meanwhile, in a distant location, a man entered a blacksmith shop seeking a weapon repair. He was met by a drinking dwarf who told him to shut up and leave, stating he no longer performed such work. After the man hurriedly apologized and left, the dwarf sat alone, mumbling to himself that he simply couldn't do it anymore. A week later, Leo was pondering Faust's promise to bring a reliable person. Beside him, Elena murmured about potential specialty products, wondering what might be suitable, while Leo touched his hair in frustration, thinking to himself that he could not come up with any ideas. This uncertainty was interrupted when Faust arrived with a hooded companion and announced that he had brought someone. The man removed his hood to reveal an old dwarf named Edmund, a former blacksmith. Leo welcomed him and introduced himself, but Edmund immediately slapped his hand away and seized his collar, asserting that he would never forgive Leo's family. Ben begged the dwarf to stop, until Edmund finally released the boy, cursed, and walked away. Leo noticed Edmund's missing right arm and asked Ben for an explanation. She clarified that the arm had been severed by Leo's brother, Lord Illuminato. Deeply affected, Leo offered an apology for his brother's cruel actions. Edmund remarked to Faust that he had come because he heard someone interesting was on the island, but found Leo instead, cautioning the guildmaster not to mess with him. Faust explained that Leo is an interesting fellow, and noted that rejecting him without a proper introduction would be a waste. Edmund turned his back, stating it was not his nature to leave after traveling so far, and decided to stay until he was convinced Leo was a bore. Faust apologized for the dwarf's attitude, adding that he was a reliable man, though Leo countered that he was shocked his own brother could do something as horrible as taking a blacksmith's arm. Faust tapped his shoulder and noted that Leo had nothing to do with those past deeds. Ben agreed, prompting Faust to clarify that he scouted Edmund because they are old friends. He believed the island might become a new home where Edmund could smile again. He turned and winked, stating that is what he believed. Later, Leo went outside to talk to Edmund and found the dwarf sitting near a tree, drinking. Edmund noticed his presence and asked about brewing alcohol, leading Leo to apologize and admit he did not understand the process well himself. The dwarf inquired about the harvestable food on the island, and Leo responded that they had tomatoes, potatoes, mushrooms, and apples. Edmund suggested that aquavit or cider would be the best options. Gaio approached and mentioned that the flavor of aquavit changes depending on the maker, prompting Edmund to note that Gaio knew his stuff. Gaio remarked it had been a while since he talked shop about booze. Sebastiano also arrived and asked if they were talking about alcohol, noting that while he is not a drinker, cider is easy to drink. Other villagers came to ask if they were making alcohol and offered to help, raising their fists and promising to start gathering ingredients. Edmund asked Leo if he was going to join them, but Leo bowed his head and apologized again for his brother's actions. Edmund countered that even if Leo apologized, his arm would not grow back. He turned his back and asked if that was all Leo had to say. Leo noted that while Edmund was on the island, he hoped he could be of some help. He called his two dolls Bis and Rhine, who flew toward the dwarf. Edmund asked what they were, and Leo explained they are dolls that move using his skill, instructing them to listen to Edmund's orders. As Leo started to head back to the village, Edmund called him back to ask how the dolls moved. He observed the wooden material and asked what the power source was. Leo clarified it was his skill, though the material was just timber. Edmund commanded him to say more about it, asking to see the blueprint and inquiring if materials other than wood were used. Leo thought to himself that Edmund is a craftsman to his core and felt glad to pique his interest. The group helped each other make the alcohol, and 3 weeks later, Edmund tasted the result and pronounced it not bad. The people cheered, and Leo suggested they have some that night. When night came, they gathered at tables outside to drink. Leo asked if Edmund was enjoying himself. Edmund turned and saw it was Leo, then mumbled that it was just him. Leo apologized again for his brother's deeds, but Edmund insisted he forget it, noting that Leo bows far too much for a noble. He stated his arm was not coming back, and even if he still had it, he had already become unable to forge weapons. Edmund explained that years before his arm was cut off, he was conscripted as a blacksmith to the borders. People died in droves by the weapons he forged, and after witnessing that, he did not know if what he was doing was right. He could not make weapons after that, and stated his life as a blacksmith ended then and there. He added that while he does not intend to forgive Leo's brother, he was mostly venting when he took it out on Leo. He apologized. Leo mentioned that right now everyone is smiling because of the alcohol, and Edmund agreed it was a good feeling. Leo said he wanted Edmund to be able to smile too. Edmund smiled as Bis and Rhine clung to him, thanking Leo for the arms. Faust called Edmund over and they enjoyed the alcohol. Meanwhile, at the shore, hooded men arrived. One instructed another to hide the boat, and stated they were heading out to assassinate Leo. At the Diste estate, a man reported to Caligoro that Leo was still alive on Ventier Island, and that the development of the fields and village was progressing well. Caligoro gritted his teeth and shouted that ever since Leo's departure, nothing had gone right. He threw documents at the man and cursed. When the man inquired about their next move, Illuminato entered the room and suggested to his father that if the report were true, it would be a waste to leave the island in Leo's hands. He noted that the island was originally their territory and asserted that taking it back would be easy if something were to happen to the Lord, for instance, an unfortunate accident. Caligoro expressed shock at his elder son's suggestion, but smiled and agreed, remarking that an unfortunate accident could not be helped. He then ordered the man to send in the agents from the shadows. On the island, Edmund constructed a charcoal kiln and informed the villagers that the structure would allow them to convert the surrounding timber into charcoal. He also pointed out that they could produce wood vinegar during the process, noting its effectiveness for soil improvement and its use as a natural insecticide. The villagers expressed amazement at these various benefits. Leo excitedly suggested they begin gathering wood for the materials, and the group headed into the forest with the assistance of the dolls to begin the work. While Gaio noted that the current area should be suitable for logging, Leo noticed strawberries and mentioned they were Kaori's favorite. Gaio questioned if they should pick some on the way back. Above them, assassins watched from the trees and confirmed their target was indeed Leo, the third son of the Diste household. Two of them jumped down while instructing the third to stay hidden and keep watch. One assassin attempted to stab Leo's head from behind, but before the blow could land, Gaio grabbed the assassin's arm to stop the attack. He questioned what business the man had with the Lord and pinned him to a tree. The second assassin rushed forward to attack, but Roy moved to the front to protect Leo. The third assassin jumped from the tree to assist his comrades, but Cohort charged in and used its paw to strike the attacker. After the three assassins were defeated, the dolls bound them with rope. Leo thanked everyone for saving him. Gaio dismissed the thanks and inquired about the identity of the attackers, but the assassins remained silent. Roy questioned what should be done with them, and Gaio suggested taking them back to the village. Leo agreed, and they escorted the captives to the settlement. There, Gaio questioned whose orders they were following. Seeing their refusal to speak, Gaio remarked that they would not spill information unless things got rough. He removed the assassin's mouth covers and again questioned who had sent them. Sebastiano suggested that such a direct approach would not suffice. He smiled and whispered something to the captives. Upon hearing the whisper, the assassins began to shake and surrendered the information. They revealed their employer was Calogero and stated they were only instructed to kill Leo. They maintained they knew nothing else and were telling the truth. Sebastiano concluded they were indeed being honest and suggested handing them over to Faust. Elena questioned if Leo was okay, while Ben muttered his name. The villagers wondered aloud what the Diste family hoped to achieve by sending assassins. Leo noticed the spreading anxiety among the people and reflected on how smoothly development had been going. He vowed not to let that family interfere again and announced they would build a defensive wall. Construction on the wall began immediately. Once it was completed, Leo expressed hope that the fortification would help everyone feel more at ease. Gaio remarked that Leo was quite selfless, considering his own life had been the one targeted. Leo countered that he would not let the Diste family interfere any longer, as he wanted to make the island a place where everyone could live happily and in peace. He also thanked Gaio for the earlier rescue. Gaio suggested he forget about it and noted it was lucky he had been nearby. Leo praised Gaio's strength, and Gaio proudly mentioned that he used to be quite a big deal back in Luzon. As Leo clapped in praise, he was struck by an idea and requested that Gaio train him. Gaio began teaching him swordsmanship, while Roy and Ben watched from the side. Roy noted that Leo was working very hard, and remarked that things should generally be fine as long as he or Gaio were around. Leo insisted that a lord who only receives protection is pathetic. Exhausted, he dropped to the ground and questioned Gaio on his performance. Gaio noted that he did well, but expressed curiosity about the way Leo's forms were mixed together. Leo suggested this was because he had read various martial arts books back when his body was weak. Gaio questioned if he had learned simply from reading and remarked that it was impressive. Since he felt he had nothing more to teach in terms of form, he suggested they move to practice. Gaio grabbed a wooden sword and asserted he would take Leo on with only one hand, challenging Leo to make him move even a single step. Leo questioned if he was sure about the handicap, and Gaio simply invited him to attack. Leo charged, but Gaio easily blocked his strikes. After a while, Leo insisted on continuing. Gaio remarked that the attempt was not bad, but became distracted when a leaf fell before him. Seeing the opportunity, Leo rushed in and managed to unarm Gaio. Gaio smiled and granted him a passing grade. Leo and Kurori celebrated by punching the air, and Leo wondered if he had become even a little stronger. Suddenly, a man from behind gathered energy at his fingertip and remarked that Leo still had a long way to go. He raised his hand, emitting a glowing light that amazed Leo. As Leo wondered what the light was, the man questioned if he had not learned magic yet. The man smiled and inquired if he was Leo, which Leo confirmed before questioning the man's identity. Faust approached and addressed the stranger as Gino, reminding him that he had promised to act as an escort, but had instead charged off on his own. While Gaio felt as though he had heard that name somewhere before, Gino remarked to Faust that with a bit of wind in the sails, a trip to the island ends in an instant. Faust countered by calling him as reckless as ever, referring to him as an old man. Gino noted that after being apart for so long, Faust still insisted on calling him an old man. Edmund questioned what brought him to the island. Gino played with his magic, and while looking at Leo, explained that he had heard an interesting young lad was around, and thought he might teach him a bit of magic. Upon hearing this, Gaio finally realized the man was the legendary elf, Gino. Gino affirmed this and cast another spell, which left Leo amazed. Leo wondered to himself about the nature of the magic, noticing that Gino appeared to be writing characters in the air. Gino remarked that in this country, using magic for combat is uncommon, so it might not immediately click for Leo. He then fired his magic forward, heating the seawater upon impact. Gino suggested that if he taught Leo, the boy might be able to use magic with that kind of power. Faust muttered that an elf who has lived that long is basically a monster, and Edmund added that even he did not know exactly how many years the old man had lived. When Gino questioned if Leo was interested, Leo begged him to teach him. The next day, while sitting cross-legged on a boulder, Gino noted that his magic was somewhat unusual. He questioned if Leo imagined things like fire when using magic, then used a stick to write on the sand. Gino explained that in his case he used characters. Leo recognized them immediately as characters from the Yamato Empire. Gino expressed surprise that Leo knew them, noting that it was the first time anyone had gotten it right since he arrived in the country. Leo explained that his mother was from Yamato, which Gino noted explained Leo's black hair and eyes. Leo questioned why Yamato characters worked for magic. Gino responded that he did not fully understand it himself, but these characters called kanji felt as though they were formed from fire itself. He suspected this made the mental image more solid, though he admitted he remained confused by the specifics. Seeing the confusion on Leo's face, Gino cautioned him not to be too surprised, and wrote on the sand to show that a specific part of a character represented a bonfire. Meanwhile, Faust received news about the assassination attempt on Leo, and questioned if the captives had confessed. Sebastiano affirmed the confession, but Faust noted that a confession alone was weak. Without physical evidence, the culprits would simply deny it and get away. Gaio agreed, stating they needed physical proof or a statement extracted under subjugation magic. He explained that subjugation magic forms a slave contract and compels truthful actions, but it is a privilege granted only to nobles. They would normally hand the assassins over through a guild for inspection, but since this was Diste territory, Sebastiano suggested they could not hand them over to Kalohero himself. Faust decided he would devise a plan and requested they keep the men detained until then. Back at the shore, Gino moved on to practice. He instructed Leo to try casting toward the sea. Leo obeyed, writing a character in the air and launching it, but the magic exploded before reaching the water. Gino noted that Leo had used the wrong stroke order and used a stick to demonstrate the correct sequence for fire. Leo tried again and was pushed back by the impact as the magic successfully hit the sea. Gino remarked that the result was more than good enough for a beginner. Leo expressed gladness, but noted his power was nowhere near Gino's. Gino agreed, emphasizing that practice is everything, while privately thinking that this boy was quite interesting. Gino then mentioned that the kanji could also be used for everyday magic, and offered to lend a hand with the island's development. Elena questioned if he was increasing the power of everyday magic as well. Gino explained that while everyday magic usually lacks power, development requires something more. He demonstrated by riding in the air and launching a spell that cut a tree, which stunned both Leo and Elena. Leo noted how useful this would be for their work. Elena questioned if that was wind magic, and Gino clarified he had combined it with earth for soil improvement. Elena attempted to ride in the air using a stick she took from Corey's mouth, but nothing happened. Gino chuckled, noting that was indeed wind, and told her not to rush. Because everyday magic was accessible to everyone, the villagers learned the new techniques and development progressed faster than ever. A few days later, Leo used rain magic to water the crops. As Gino drank tea, he noted his satisfaction with everyone's improvement. Roy approached with a kettle and questioned if he would like another serving. Gino accepted and questioned if Roy was interested in magic. Roy explained that he runs on Leo's magic power and does not use magic himself. Gino expressed surprise, questioning if Roy was also animated by Leo's mysterious skill. He noted that Roy was different from the other dolls. Roy affirmed this, explaining that Leo had cherished him since he was little, and he believed that bond made him different. Roy vowed to protect Leo even without magic. Gino expressed awe and smiled, thinking to himself that even at his age there were things he did not know. At the port, Faust arrived with Alvaro and apologized to Leo for the wait. He explained that they were taking the assassins to the Farilla territory, where he had acquaintances who could help smooth things over without ties to Diste or Lucian. Sebastiano remarked that this was reassuring, but questioned if an escort was needed. He noted they could not leave the island undefended, but also stated the assassins were their trump card. Faust agreed it would be a problem if the captives were killed before they could testify, and suggested hiring adventurers, or perhaps having Gaio assist. Leo interrupted, stating that he would come with them. Faust asserted that since Leo was the primary target, there was no need for him to purposely put himself in danger. Leo understood the risk, yet countered that being the target was exactly why he needed to go. He questioned whether it would be better to deal with all potential attackers at once, rather than splitting his focus between those on the island and those following the assassins. Gaio disagreed, noting the plan was far too dangerous. He emphasized that fighting on the island offered a geographical advantage that should not be discarded. Leo explained that this incident would finally bring the misdeeds of the Diste family to light. He inquired whether the Farilla territory maintained a neutral stance, which Sebastiano confirmed. Leo suggested that the Lord of Farilla might become a supporter of Ventier Island as a result of these events. If that happened, any future attack on Ventier would escalate into a dispute between lords, making it much harder for his family to interfere. Sebastiano agreed, noting that such an alliance would make it difficult for the Diste family to act once the matter was no longer contained within their own borders. Faust remained skeptical, noting that the Diste family were still nobles, however corrupt, and doubted the situation would be that simple. Gaio added that if the battle became more difficult than expected, they might struggle to protect Leo, and urged him to stay on the island. Ben observed that Faust and Gaio were not refusing out of spite, admitting that even she wanted to stop him. She questioned if there was another reason Leo was being so persistent. Leo clarified that as the lord of the island, he felt he must handle the island's affairs himself. Faust remarked that while he did not know the full story, it was clear Leo was a victim, conveniently abandoned on a deserted island, and then targeted once he became an inconvenience. He questioned why Leo would go to such lengths for a place that began with so much hardship. Leo acknowledged that he might have been a victim, and admitted he was filled with anxiety when he first arrived. However, he explained that he had gained so much on the island. He had the help of Roy and Kure, and he had met Elena and the others. He noted that building a village and a port with everyone was an experience he never could have imagined while making dolls alone in his bed. Because he was grateful, he wanted to do everything in his power to protect his new home. Gino arrived and called the sentiment admirable, suggesting they respect Leo's wishes. Gaio countered that despite coming of age, Leo was still a 15-year-old child. He insisted that, like Elena, Leo should not have to bear such a burden. Gino pointed out that from his perspective they were all children, and noted that Leo was rapidly improving in both swordsmanship and magic. He questioned if they really thought the boy would be a mere burden. Gaio finally surrendered, announcing they would take Leo with them, though he insisted on deciding the group members, Leo, Roy, Kure, Faust, and himself. As they readied themselves, Leo requested that Ben take care of the island in his absence. Ben agreed, vowing to protect it, and handed him a charm her mother had given her, urging him to return safely. Elena approached and offered a pure gold pocket watch that had been passed down through her family for generations. She explained it was her emotional support, and that she had prayed to it for a peaceful path ahead. Sebastiano reassured her that Leo would be fine with Gaino by his side. Edmund and Gino then approached to entrust Leo with a real sword and a magic book. Gino explained the book was a collection of characters he used for magic, which would help Leo increase his repertoire. Edmund clarified that the sword was forged using the arms Leo had given him. It was not meant for killing, but for protection. He noted that these were precious items, and that they expected Leo to return them alive. Leo thanked everyone and accepted the responsibility. Gaio tapped Roy's shoulder and invited him aside for a private conversation. He acknowledged Roy's true strength and urged him not to worry about the others. His only focus should be protecting Leo. Roy agreed, stating that had been his intention from the beginning. Gaio smiled at his honesty and noted they were counting on him. The group then waved goodbye to the villagers as they boarded the boat. Once they were moving, Faust suggested they confirm their plans. They would have the Lord of Farilla use subordination magic on the captured assassins to reveal their employer. He emphasized that the captives were the crucial evidence and must be delivered safely, noting the Diste family might become desperate enough to try anything. Gaio remarked that if all went well, they would be back in a few days, and told the group to take it easy. Meanwhile, a man on horseback gritted his teeth, mumbling that the situation had changed for the worse. He muttered Faust's name and expressed hope that the group had not yet departed. Chapters end at 12. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you loved this manga. Have a good day.